we're going to get into our topic tonight of purpose. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about because we talked about in the very beginning, our first meeting, we talked about identity. And that's so important for us to first find our identities as men. But also a lot of us, not that we lack purpose because we don't try, but it's like we lack purpose because we just don't have, we don't feel that divine calling to something, right? And purpose, sometimes we overcomplicate it. And so I'm going to hopefully simplify that for us tonight with some study that I did, and so also some things that help make practical steps towards it. I'm not going to say you're going to walk out here tonight, hey, if you don't know your purpose, you can walk out here and say, hey man, I know exactly what God's called me to do. Not necessarily, but it'll give you some practical steps to help get you there. It does take some time and some prayer time between you and God, some alone time, and to be honest, some experiences to find out what God has called you to do. So I hope it's enlightening for you. I hope it's refreshing for you. I hope it's encouraging to you tonight. But what we're going to talk about. So when we talk about purpose, the word, I'm going to emphasize a couple different ways to use the word purpose. That you were created on purpose, with purpose, and for a purpose. And so what I mean with that, guys, is that first of all, your conception and birth were not a mistake. So a lot of people go through life thinking that I was a mistake, my parents didn't want me, whatever it may be. That's not true. So you were created on purpose, first and foremost. Secondly, God created you with plans to use you in a great way. That's the with purpose, right? So he created you with a purpose that is so uniquely crafted to you that only you can carry out. And that's the last point here. Your purpose in this life is unique to you. So none of this tonight is going to talk about comparing what God has called you to do versus what the man to your right or to your left is called to do. Nobody's really called to do it in the same way. We're all called to a degree to do the same thing, and we'll talk about that tonight, but not in the same way. So your gifts are unique to you. And so how you use them is up to you. But your gifts are unique to you specifically. So let's talk about this tonight. So, and a couple phrases that I love to talk about this as it relates to Brothers of Courage and what we strive to do here is, first of all, a man can have identity without purpose, but cannot have purpose without first having identity. Okay? So that's why we put identity as one of the first topics in Brothers of Courage, so we can help establish that and help you find that. And then moving into helping you find your purpose in that. Okay? So, but you don't really you can't put the cart before the horse and have purpose if you don't know your identity first. Okay? And that's where we have talk about differentiate a lot of times between the Christian man and the man of God. That a Christian man may have an identity, but a man of God knows his purpose. Okay? So tonight, what are the benefits of knowing your purpose? So before we even talk about what it is, like, why should we know our purpose, right? So that helps us understand why we're talking about this tonight. A couple of things. It gives meaning to your life, and you'll understand with the next example I'm going to give about Jesus. It gives meaning to your life. It gave meaning to the life of Jesus, both when he was, in his, walking days, but now and today. It gives meaning to your life, but now also it simplifies your life. You can narrow your focus and filter everything through the lens of, does this fall in line with my purpose? And it really gives you some really clear answers on what you should and shouldn't be doing in your life to follow your purpose. And it focuses your life. Like I just said, you filter everything through that lens, you're able to focus, put on the blinders, and focus on that one thing, or that one part of your life. And so it motivates your life, because typically your purpose is something that inspires you. You're passionate about your purpose, so you look forward to doing it. A lot of us have jobs that we don't look forward to going to every day. A lot of us are in situations in relationships and family situations where we don't look forward to it. But now your purpose is something that ignites a passion in you, and you're excited to carry it out every single day. You're living for it, okay? And then lastly, it prepares you for your eternity. There's that, I didn't put it in the notes here today, but well done, good and faithful servant, right? And then also he's going to ask you, what did you do with my son Jesus? So those are questions that we have to account for, and so this is going to help prepare you for that. So all this to say is that when you know the benefits of your purpose, and once we're able to really narrow that down and find that, it's the difference in your life between walking on purpose versus walking in purpose, right? And what I mean there is walking on purpose is us going through the motions of our daily lives, right? So it's intention to get up, go to work, come home, play with the kids, spend time with your wife, go to bed, and do the same thing over again tomorrow, right? That's kind of walking out. You're doing it intentionally, but you're not doing it passionately. And when you're walking in purpose, that's when you're really excited to get up every single day and go and knock out what you're called to do. And now, as I say this, don't mistake purpose with vocation. So purpose isn't necessarily your job necessarily. It's not what pays the bills necessarily. It's not necessarily something that you clock in and out of or gets deposited into your bank account every 2 weeks. So purpose can be a role that you play in your life. A lot of fathers are in this room. Maybe some of you are called to be an outstanding father, be the father that you didn't have. things like that. So it's not necessarily my job and my purpose aren't always the same thing. So let's don't get those twisted as we talk about this tonight. Okay. Now, Jesus had a very clear purpose, and he walked in that every day. So I got a couple scriptures we're going to talk about as far as what Jesus' purpose was. So I put John 3:17 on here. Most everybody knows John 3:16, and Jerry's going to read that tonight, John 3:16. But I won't put this on the verse right after that. Okay. So Jerry, you've got John chapter 3, verses 16 and 17.
God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him.
So the emphasis on that second part, right? So to save the world through Jesus, right? And that's what Jesus' purpose was to save the world. Okay, not an easy task, right? And so not something that is lightly taken. So that was very simple, but it wasn't easy. I say simple, it was just that one thing. Was it easy? Not easy at all. He died on the cross for us. He died a brutal death for us. But it was simple in terms of here's the one thing. But to get there wasn't easy for him to do. So again, don't confuse simple and easy as we talk about focusing on your purpose. So Jesus' purpose gave us our salvation. That's what his purpose was, to save us and give us our eternity, our salvation in eternity. Now, our purpose, Matthew 20:28, who's got this? Philip? So this is where Jesus gave his life as a ransom for many, right? So now I'm not saying we have to literally give our lives physically for him, but we're to live for him in this, okay? So our purpose in this is to use our gifts to draw others to him in ways that only you can. Okay. Now there's another verse we're going to talk about in a little bit. I don't know if it's in the notes or not, but basically it's go and make disciples of all the nations. Right? That's our purpose is as human beings, as men, go out and make, and whether you're man or woman, your calling as a follower of Jesus is to go and make disciples of all the nations. And that's what we're called to do. Okay. Now, to do that though, you're going to use your gifts to draw others to Jesus in only ways that you can. So there are going to be situations where, there are rooms that I'm in that I can't connect with people. But there might be a room that Stephen's in, he connected with those same people that I can't get to, right? And there's going to be rooms that Alex is in that he can connect to those people that I can't get to, right? So again, I'm not going to compare myself to being any kind of savior at all, but I can reach people, Stephen can reach people, Alex can reach people in ways that only they can, right? And then you can do the same thing. There are people in your life that only you can penetrate their hearts with. And only your actions, your words, your gifts can get to them and draw them to Jesus. More so than I can, more so than Gilbert can, more so than Mike can. So in ways that only you can. So God's going to put people in your life, in your path, that you're going to use you to speak to them to draw them to him. Okay? Now it's for us to submit to that and kind of lean into that. Easier said than done. So now your purpose, and we talked about knowing the benefits of it, and it gave an example of the ultimate example of Jesus. But now I learned that there's an intersection how to find your purpose. And again, you may not find it tonight. I don't want to promise anybody that you're going to walk out knowing your purpose tonight. But your purpose is at the intersection of your talents and your passions and how you glorify God with it. Okay. Now I've got a chart here that I found. It's going to be a terrible example of how to find it, of an illustration. But I hope you get my heart behind this. Okay. So I'm not an artist, guys, and I'm not a graphic designer. So bear with me as I do this here. So the intersection of your talents and your passions. So your effortless skill. So effortless skill is your talents, right? So things that you're just naturally good at. There's some people like in the world that are like great athletes, and they're just naturally born athletes. They can play any sport. They can pick up a ball and dunk. They can hit a hole in one, and they can bowl a strike. All those things, right? So they're just naturally talented athletes. Other men are going to be talented. They're going to be blessed with the ability to lead. So they've got just this natural leadership on them. They can just call people, and people follow them, right? Others of us are going to be called to have skills in life that was just come naturally. You don't have to practice, and you're just good at. You've just been good at all your life, right? There are people in here that are much better at this graphic stuff than I am. that are really good at this, right? I have to work at this kind of stuff, but Dan makes it look easy when he does all this stuff for us. Now, effortless skills, what you're really good at without much practice, right? Now, the other part is your passions. This is your endless joy. These are the things that you just love doing. Okay, this is the stuff that basically, if I could do this for the rest of my life, if I could do this for the rest of my life and get paid for it, I'd sign me up. This is what I would do. Like, this is the one thing I would love to do for the rest of my life. Some people love fishing. Some people love cooking. Some people love working on cars. Some people love just spending time doing in mentorship and things like that. So whatever brings you endless joy, the things you just love doing and you have a strong passion for, that you could go on and talk about for a really long time without interruption and just with enthusiasm, with some zeal, right? So think about that. So you got your effortless skill, you got your endless joy. So think about those as kind of some silos that go up, right? So at some point, when those cross and those intersect, that's where your purpose lies, right? So that's the action of it, okay? Now what you do with it is the other part, and how you glorify God with it. That's the part that's the most important about this, is that God's put gifts in you that you're good at, you're great at, that you love to do, and where those things intersect, and how you glorify God with it. Because I'll give you an example. There are people that can use their gifts for the wrong things, right? I was talking about this the other day about a great leader in history. He got men to follow him, millions of men to follow him and follow his mission, but for a terrible cause. Adolf Hitler, right? Great leader, obviously got millions of men to follow him and follow his orders and get behind his cause. Terrible human being, but he was a great leader in getting people to follow him, okay? So that's an example of somebody who had purpose, did not glorify God with it, obviously. So that's an example of somebody that has great skills, but didn't glorify God with it, okay? So, and again, I'm not gassing up Hitler here or anything like that. I'm not pro-Hitler or anything like that, so please don't take it in that context. So when you think about your purpose, I found this quote from Howard Thurman that I love because it really helps inspire a human being to do, and live a more passionate life, okay? And it says, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive, right? So many of us are working jobs that we just hate, jobs that we're just dull and boring. We do it because it pays the bills, or maybe do it because it pays a lot of money. Maybe do it because you have to. You feel like you got born into it or thrown into it, or maybe you're going through life and just going through the motions. There's no zeal in life for you. Okay, but do what makes you come alive, and I think that's what's really important. And that's with the effortless joy. But your purpose ignites you, right? So you're passionate about it. It's something that you love doing, and even as hard as it gets, sometimes you still push through because you love doing it and you're good at it. Okay? So this is a graph that I came up with. So I found it's a terrible example, but think about line A is your effortless skill, the things that you're really good at. Line B is the endless joy. So somewhere in there, they're going to intersect, right? And so so in this case, it's right there. Other case, it's going to be whatever. But you get the point. That's where you find your purpose in that. And then now you're going to glorify God with that. So how do I use this to glorify God? So you think about those people that have these, I'll go back to the athletes again, example, right? So athletes have these huge platforms when they become professional athletes. What are they doing with it, right? Are they honoring God with their platform, or are they LeBron James and saying it's all about me, right? So, and then, what do they do with their platform? So if you have a man that's, great, he's just really sound financially, like Warren Buffett, right? A great guy that knows a ton about, businesses and money and those kind of things. And he's worth billions of dollars, but he glorifies God with that he does the reverse tithe, right? He lives off his 10% and gives the 90%, things like that. So what are you doing with your gifts that God's given you? And then how are you glorify God with it, right? So think about that. So again, don't mind my illustration. It's a hack of a job right there, but you get the point. All right, now about this, and I mentioned earlier that, so purpose is revealed through, knowing how to find it, number one, but then two, talking to God about it and some prayer time and sitting in prayer alone with that. But then also one of the best teachers of how to find your purpose is your experiences. And sometimes, how do you know what you're good at? By experience, right? So how do you know what you enjoy doing? By experience, okay? Now, what I'm going to talk about next is there's a couple verses here that I want to share that really emphasize how finding purpose sometimes isn't fun. And I want to give my example in just a second. But a couple verses here that I want to share with you guys. Romans 8:28, a wildly popular verse that a lot of people know, but really only emphasize the first half of the verse. So who's got Romans 8:28? Adolf? All right, so you're going to read that for us?
We know that all things work together for the good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to.
All right, so people like to recite that verse, but only the first part. They like to say, and we know that God causes everything to work together. That's where they stop, right? God causes everything happens for a reason. And if you're going through something that's not fun, unpleasant, traumatic, painful, and everything happens for a reason. You hate hearing that. I remember when I was going through my stuff and somebody said, everything happens for a reason. I just want to punch them in the face because I don't want to hear that right now. But it's partially true, right? But the rest of it, for the good of those who love God, remember you're glorifying God with your purpose, and according to the purpose, His purpose for them. His purpose, not yours, right? So the reason you're in pain is probably something that didn't go according to your plan, right? So that's why you're in pain about this. That's why you're hurting about this. That's why people are telling you everything happens for a reason, and you turn to this verse. So context, think about the whole verse, not just the first part of that, and you can't cherry pick the verses that we want to live out here, right? All right, now the next one, Proverbs 20:30. Alex, you got that, right? This is in the Good News translation. I love how it hits you in the Good News translation, the GNT. So Alex, you got Proverbs 20, verse 30.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways.
Sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways. Ain't that the truth, right? So sometimes we got to get kicked in the teeth to realize we got to make a change, right? And so sometimes it's if you're in a job and you're just going through the motions, or maybe you're kind of unethical about your job, and suddenly you get fired. Well, that's a wake-up call. You got to change your ways now. Some of us have been through painful breakups and divorces where one of us didn't change our ways, and then now you're in a situation where you're single again, right? So sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways. I really love that verse and the emphasis behind that. So, but that's where these experiences come in. All these experiences that are shaping you aren't necessarily, it's not the good experiences that help shape us most of the time, right? It's the ones that hurt us, that cause us pain, that cause us to change. That's what gets our attention. Remember we talked about Kairos moments and that circle, right? And how God gets our attention. It's usually a painful moment. It's not the mountaintop that He gets our attention. It's in the valley where He gets our attention. All right. And the last one, last verse we have is Proverbs 19, verse 21. Juan, you got that right?
Make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail.
We can make we can make our plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail, right? So many are the plans of a man, in the mind of a man, but it's the purpose of the Lord that will stand. So again, our plans are never going to trump His purpose, right? We may take a long route to get there by doing our plan, but ultimately He's going to win in the end. And so, why not just shorten that up a little bit and not have to go through all that pain and process and yucky stuff and just submit to Him, right? So, with this, guys, so those, let me see. Okay, I'm going to go back a little bit. So now I'm going to show you with an example from a personal experience of mine. Purpose. And I remember distinctly when God revealed His purpose to me one night. It was a Friday night in May. I was alone, and it was after my divorce. I went through a really painful and devastating divorce. So it was really hard on me, really tough, and put me in a really low point in my life, really dark season. And I remember as I was pursuing this other woman, and we got in this argument on this Friday night, and it was because some trauma and hurt that she'd experienced with another man caused her to react negatively to a situation with me. Right? So it wasn't my fault necessarily, but it was his actions caused her pain, and she responded negatively to me in this. Okay? So, and that hurt me, right? So hurt people. And so I'm in pain because of this, but I'm mad at this other guy that I've never met. I don't know the guy. I couldn't pick him out. I know him from a can of paint. But I'm mad at this guy because he hurt her, and now she's hurting me, right? So now I'm mad at him. I'm cursing his name, right? I'm mad at this guy, and I'm like, man, this guy's a dirtbag. He's a piece of crap, and all this right stuff. And I'm literally, so I'm on my knees crying, literally crying to God on this Friday night in May, and I'm telling God, hey man, why is this happening to me? Why am I suffering for what he did? Why am I paying the consequences for what he did? And then Lord checked me real quick and was like, hey, Jesus did that for you. He paid the price for all the consequences of your stupid actions, and He paid the price by dying on the cross. So He checked me real quick on that. And so, so God got my attention in this moment, right? So then as I'm praying to God in this and crying to God in this, I said, well, what am I supposed to do about it? All right, how am I supposed to fix this? How am I supposed to help this? How am I supposed to get out of this situation? And so I'm mad at this other person I've never met, right? And it's a man. And God says to me, you're supposed to help him. I'm like, what, are you kidding me? This guy? And God didn't mean help him specifically, this one specific person, but you're supposed to help men. You're supposed to help men get their healing. You're supposed to help men heal so they don't hurt women, so they don't hurt other men. And that cycle and that cyclical nature of hurt people. If you've ever been through Cultivate here at City Tribe, we talk about that a lot, and we go through stuff like this. And we talk about this kind of stuff. And at this point, I'd already gone through Cultivate and a couple seasons of leading and facilitating that. So now God's really got my attention in this. So God's revealing to me in this purpose that I've always been. So in my life, ever since I was in like junior high and high school, I've always been called to lead, and I thank God for that leadership of calling that He's put on my life. So now I know that I'm called to lead, and now He's always put me in situations where I'm leading men, like in sports and in college and fraternity and other things like that. I've always been leading men. Okay, so now I've got call. I'm supposed to lead men. How am I supposed to lead these men? And now He's revealing to me in this moment of pain, He's supposed to lead men through their pain to their healing in Jesus and to their salvation in Jesus, right? So I'm supposed to help men get through there. And so really, when God spoke to me in that moment, it really like opened my eyes and opened my heart, and I was joyful after just being in pain just minutes ago. And so as I got this moment of revelation towards me, and really that was the genesis of a couple tribes here at City Tribe, the Soul Servants, the single group, and then now Brothers of Courage. And so as a result of those things that I went through, I was able to start those groups here. And so now here we are a couple of years later, and we're at Brothers of Courage, and I'm sharing my testimony that because of that, and thank God I'm through that, and I'm in a better situation now, and then God's blessed me with so many things in my life now as a result of me hopefully walking in my purpose as best I can. So in those moments, but again, it was that painful moment that helped me discover my purpose. It wasn't the mountaintops. It's those valleys where God gets your attention and He shows you that when you're at your rock bottom, like He's there for you. I got you. Here's what I'm teaching you. Here's how we're going to get through this, and here's what to do with it. Okay. Now I'm going to show you a couple. So for me, the next step in your purpose walk is once you really can hone in on your purpose, what God's called you to do, develop a purpose statement. And this is something kind of like if you're applying for jobs. Sometimes they make you give like a purpose statement or like I forget what some kind of declaration or something like that on your resume, your cover letter, something like that. But now, as you walk in your purpose walk here, you can talk about developing a purpose statement. I'm fortunate that I've found mine, and I've kind of refined it a little bit as well. It's to lead men through their pain, to their healing, and to their salvation in Jesus Christ. And I feel like that for me it's not necessarily a job that I get to pay the bills with, but it's something that I get to store up some heavenly treasures with, and I can't wait to see those one day, right? But it's something that I find a lot of joy in, and it's something I find that the Lord has blessed me to be able to do fairly well on a regular basis here. And He's given me a platform like here, leading a group of brothers here at City Tribe. Now, here's some things that will help you in finding your purpose, some statements that you think about these and pray about these. And so, number one, don't confuse your plans with God's purpose, right? And again, I mentioned earlier, like your plans are typically what get us in trouble when we take it in our plans instead of His purpose. So think about it. So don't confuse your plans with His purpose. Okay. Now the other part, I love this one. I heard this from Ed Milet, one of an author and podcaster I like to listen to. You are most qualified to help who you used to be. I love this one, man, because this is where you can relate to that person. Remember I talked about earlier being able to connect to certain people. You are most qualified to help who you used to be because you're able to connect to them because I know what you're going through, bro. I've been there. I know what that's like. And so when you connect to people, it's because that common experience, right? So you're most qualified to help who you used to be. So there have been in here that are former drug addicts. I can't connect to that person as well as that person can. Because if you know the struggle, you know the pain, you know the process, and you know the recovery, and you know what's on the other side of it. Again, who you used to be. That's the important part about this. So it's not who you are anymore, it's who you used to be now. Okay? So, because you can share with that person what's on the other side of this. Whatever they're going through right now, I'm a testimony of what's on the other side of heartbreak and divorce and pain like that, right? There are other men in here that are on the other side of recovery. Other men that are on here on the other side of being lost and now being found. And other men that were not fathers and now they are fathers. And all these things, right? And maybe restore relationships in your families with your own father, with your children, things like that. So again, most qualified to help who you used to be. And then lastly, if you don't feel like God's called you to anything, don't feel alone in that because you're not. Because God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And so there are all kinds of examples in the Bible of men that felt underqualified for something that God called them to. But He called them to it and He called them through it. Okay? And that's where God has put an anointing on your life as a man to whatever He's called you to. I don't know what that is, and maybe you don't right this second either, and that's okay. But God has called you to something that only you can do, shoes only you can wear. Okay, now I want you to pray about this, lean into this, if this interests you. All right, if it interests you to find your purpose. If it's not, I'm sorry, we should come tonight. But if it's something that you want to know more about, like pray about this and pray about those things we mentioned earlier. But then these statements are kind of things you can kind of ruminate over and kind of like help you in your prayer time in finding that, as well as those verses that we mentioned earlier, the 5 verses we mentioned earlier. Okay, so now we'll break into our groups and do our discussion questions. So a lot of time for discussion tonight, since I wanted to really get through this, we can really get into our groups and really chew this up tonight. So discussion questions. Number 1, what's something you're really good at? So share with the guys what you're really good at. People like to brag about stuff they're good at. So if you're really good at something, share with the guys. What's something that comes to mind for you that's effortless skill, something you've always been good at? Number 2, what's something you're really passionate about? What's that endless joy for you? Is it fishing? Is it working on cars? Is it cooking? Is it reading? What's that thing for you? And number 3, how can you combine those to glorify God? Right. So, and this is just the beginning of you starting your purpose walk and getting these wheels turning here. So, how can you combine 1 and 2, effortless skill and endless joy, to glorify God? And lastly, what do you believe your purpose is? So, some of us are walking into tonight thinking, "Cool, I think I know my purpose. I've walked in my life. I think this is what I'm called to do." Others are, but you know what? I've never even thought about it. I just go through life. I let life lead me, and here I am today. But now you can think about this. What do you believe your purpose is? And there's no wrong answers to this, right? So I think the bottom line, all of us are called to be disciples. Go and make disciples of all the nations. That's number 1 for us. But how are you called to do that? And that's your purpose.